The notification lit up my phone at exactly 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was already 3 hours into my workday, sitting in my high-security apartment in downtown Chicago, surrounded by dual monitors and stacks of printed bank statements. My name is Morgan, and I am a forensic accountant. That sounds like a boring desk job to most people, but in reality, I am a financial bloodhound. When federal agencies or high-net-worth divorce lawyers want to find where a CEO is hiding his millions before declaring bankruptcy, they call me. I look at spreadsheets and see the ghosts of greed hiding behind the numbers. I see the shell companies in the Cayman Islands, the fake invoices for consulting fees, and the assets transferred to mistresses. I paused my analysis of a cartel's money laundering scheme to look at my phone. I expected a text from a client. Instead, it was an email. The sender wasn't my father, Garrison. It was from his executive assistant, a poor woman named Sarah who probably hadn't been paid in 2 months. The subject line read, "Update regarding upcoming nuptials." My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. After 30 years of being Garrison's daughter, you learn to expect the blow, not fear it. I opened the email. It was formatted like a corporate memo. "Dear Morgan," it began. "After careful consideration and discussion with the bride-to-be, Garrison and Brittany have decided to curate a specific energy for their special day. Brittany feels that your presence often brings a judgmental atmosphere that would not be conducive to the joy of the occasion. Therefore, we are rescinding your invitation to the ceremony and the reception. We hope you understand and respect their need for positivity. Regards, the Office of Garrison Enterprises." I stared at the screen. I wasn't uninvited by a phone call. I wasn't uninvited by a text from my own father. I was banned via a memo from a failing company. Brittany. The name tasted like cheap artificial sweetener. She was 26 years old. I am 30. That is right, my father's new wife is 4 years younger than me. She feels my energy is judgmental. That is rich coming from a woman who I once watched Google how to spell prenup at a dinner table because she thought I wasn't looking. I set my coffee mug down on the coaster. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone against the wall. I am a professional. I deal in facts, in logic, and in the cold, hard reality of ledgers. My father, Garrison, is a 60-year-old narcissist who believes the world exists solely to serve his ego. He views his children not as human beings, but as investments. My brother, Trent, was the golden stock, volatile, risky, but always bailed out. I was the safe bond, boring, reliable, and ultimately liquidated when I no longer served a purpose. So, I was banned. Banned from the wedding of the year, or so Garrison kept calling it. He had been bragging about this event for 6 months. He claimed it would be the society event of the decade, a lavish affair to prove to his investors that he was still a titan of industry. He wanted to hold it at a 5-star resort in Aspen. I closed the email and opened a new tab on my browser. I didn't go to Facebook. I went to the county clerk's public records for Pitkin County, Colorado, where the Aspen resort was located. I knew Garrison's financials better than he did, even though I hadn't worked for him in 5 years. I knew he was leveraged to the hilt. I knew his credit lines were maxed out. It took me 3 minutes to find what I was looking for. A lien filing. The resort had canceled his reservation yesterday due to non-payment of the $50,000 deposit. I leaned back in my chair. So, that was the real reason. It wasn't just about Brittany's energy. It was about money. It was always about money. Garrison was broke. The Aspen wedding was off. But he couldn't cancel the wedding without admitting failure, which meant he needed a free venue. A venue that looked expensive, had history, and, in his mind, belonged to him. I opened a spreadsheet I had named Project Foreclosure. I typed in a new entry, date, October 14th. Event, the ban. Probable next move, Stonehaven Ridge. He was coming for the ranch. He was coming for the one thing my mother had left behind. He thought he could just waltz in and take it. I cracked my knuckles. Garrison thought he had banned me from a party. He didn't realize he had just invited himself into a trap. To understand why I didn't just feel sad, you have to understand the players on this board. My father, Garrison, is a man who wears $3,000 suits while his electricity is being shut off. He lives on appearance. When I was a child, if I got an A-, he would ask why it wasn't an A+, not because he cared about my education, but because he wanted to brag to his golf buddies about having a genius daughter. When I became a forensic accountant, he stopped bragging. Why? Because my job is catching liars, and Garrison is the biggest liar I know. He was terrified I would look too closely at his books. And then there is Trent. My brother. 33 years old, and he has never held a job for longer than 6 months. He fancies himself an entrepreneur. In reality, he is a professional gambler with a losing streak that has lasted a decade. Garrison loves him. He sees Trent as a younger version of himself, charismatic, bold, a risk-taker. Every time Trent gets into trouble with bookies or loan sharks, Garrison bails him out. He calls it investing in Trent's potential. I call it lighting money on fire. Finally, there is Brittany. The bride. The reason I was banned. Brittany is what you get when you combine an Instagram addiction with a complete lack of moral compass. She met my father 6 months ago at a club where she was working as a bottle service girl. There is nothing wrong with that job, but Brittany acted like she was a displaced princess waiting to be rescued. I remember the dinner where she decided I was her enemy. It was 3 months ago. Garrison insisted we all meet at a high-end steakhouse to celebrate their engagement. Brittany sat there, flashing a ring that I knew was bought on credit, talking about how hard it is to plan a wedding when you are a perfectionist. I just want everything to be, like, aesthetically pleasing, she had said, mispronouncing the word aesthetically. Garrison promised me we could have ponies. I love ponies. Horses, I had corrected gently. If you are riding them, they are usually horses. Ponies are small. She had glared at me with eyes that were heavily lined with black makeup. I know what a horse is, Morgan. You always have to make me feel stupid, don't you? You think you are so smart because you have a degree and wear blazers. I don't think I'm smart because of my blazer, Brittany, I had replied, taking a sip of wine. I think I'm smart because I checked the credit limit on the card Garrison is using to pay for this dinner, and unless he makes a transfer in the next 10 minutes, it is going to be declined. Garrison had turned purple. He slammed his hand on the table. That is enough, Morgan. Stop counting my money. The card was declined. I ended up paying for the steak. Brittany never forgave me for that humiliation. She saw me as the barrier between her and the lifestyle she thought she deserved. She whispered in Garrison's ear that I was toxic, that I was jealous of her youth, that I wanted them to fail. She was half right. I didn't want them to be happy, because their happiness was built on a foundation of lies and debts. But I wasn't jealous. I was preparing. Garrison had convinced Brittany that he was a multimillionaire with a vast real estate portfolio. The crown jewel of that portfolio, in his stories, was Stonehaven Ridge. A sprawling ranch in Montana, sitting on 500 acres of pine forest and river valleys. He told her it was his ancestral home. He lied. It wasn't his. It was never his. It was my mother's. And now, thanks to a mountain of paperwork and a lot of liquid cash, it was mine. Stonehaven Ridge isn't just land. It is a sanctuary. My mother, Eleanor, bought it 20 years ago with an inheritance she received from her own parents. She knew Garrison would gamble away every cent of their shared accounts, so she kept Stonehaven separate. It was her escape. It was where she went when Garrison's affairs became too obvious or his temper became too volatile. It has a main lodge built of heavy timber and stone, a barn that actually smells like hay and sweet feed, and a silence so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. Mom died 5 years ago from cancer. It was a slow, brutal exit. During those last months, Garrison was conveniently absent. He had business trips to Las Vegas and Miami. I was the one who changed her sheets. I was the one who managed her pain medication. And in her final moments, I was the one holding her hand while Garrison was probably buying drinks for a stranger. In her will, Mom left the ranch to a family trust. The idea was to keep it safe for me and Trent. But Garrison, being the surviving spouse, manipulated his way into being the trustee. He had control. He couldn't sell it outright without my signature, but he found a loophole. He used the property as collateral for a massive, high-interest business loan from a private equity firm that specialized in predatory lending. He took out $2 million against my mother's memory. And of course, he defaulted. I found out about it 6 months ago. I was doing a routine check of my own credit and decided to peek at the trust status. I saw the notice of default. The lender was preparing to foreclose. Garrison hadn't told anyone. He was ignoring the letters, hoping a miracle would happen, or maybe he planned to let the bank take it and blame the economy. I couldn't let that happen. Stonehaven was the only place I ever felt safe. I didn't confront him. If I had told him I knew, he would have guilt-tripped me into paying off the loan for him, and then he would have done it again a year later. You cannot save a drowning man who keeps punching holes in the life raft. So, I became the bank. I used my life savings, my retirement fund, and I liquidated my stock portfolio. I formed an anonymous limited liability company called Nemesis Holdings. I contacted the predatory lender. They didn't care who paid them, they just wanted their money. I bought the debt note from them for the full $2 million plus fees. Then, acting as Nemesis Holdings, I initiated the foreclosure process on the trust. But instead of kicking the family out publicly, I finalized the paperwork quietly. The title transferred to Nemesis Holdings, me, 3 months ago. Legally, Garrison is no longer the trustee. The trust is empty. The ranch belongs to me, 100%. But because Garrison is incompetent and ignores legal mail that doesn't look like a check, he never opened the final notification. He still thinks he controls the trust. He still thinks the ranch is his fallback plan. After the Aspen venue fell through, I knew exactly what his plan was. He would pivot to Stonehaven. It was free, it was private, and he could spin a story to Brittany that it was more intimate and exclusive than a resort. He would bring his entire circus to the place where my mother died, trample her garden, and pledge his eternal love to a 26-year-old gold digger in the living room where I mourned. I looked at my spreadsheet. The math was simple. I had spent $2 million to buy a debt. Now, I needed to collect. I picked up my phone and called my boss. I need to take personal leave, I said. Family emergency. Is everything okay, Morgan? He asked. No, I said, looking at the photo of my mother on my desk. But it's about to be resolved. I wasn't going to tell Garrison he couldn't use the ranch. That would be too easy. I was going to let him break in. I was going to let him set up his stage. I was going to let him invite his investors, his friends, and his enemies. And then, when he felt like a king in his castle, I was going to show him that he was just a trespasser in mine. I drove the rented Ford Expedition up the winding gravel driveway of Stonehaven Ridge 4 days before the wedding date. The air here was different, thinner, sharper, smelling of pine needles and snow. It was mid-October in Montana, which meant the ground was already dusted with a layer of frost. The ranch house sat on a rise overlooking the valley. It looked abandoned. The windows were dark eyes staring back at me. Garrison hadn't paid for maintenance in 2 years, so the grass was overgrown, and a shutter was hanging loose on the second floor. I parked the truck around the back, hidden behind the old barn. I didn't want tire tracks visible in the front snow. I wasn't here to clean. I was here to stage a crime scene. I unlocked the back door with my key, the only key that mattered now. The air inside was stale and cold. The heating had been turned off to save money. I walked through the kitchen, my boots echoing on the hardwood floors. I ran my hand along the butcher block island where my mom used to roll out pie dough. I'm sorry, Mom, I whispered into the silence. But we have to do this. I opened my duffel bag. It wasn't filled with clothes, it was filled with hardware. I spent the next 6 hours turning my childhood home into a surveillance fortress. I installed tiny, high-definition cameras in the bookshelves, nesting them between the spines of old encyclopedias. I placed one inside the hollowed-out eye of a deer mount in the hallway. I put another one on top of the kitchen cabinets, angled to capture the entire room. These weren't cheap nanny cams. These were battery-operated, motion-activated units that uploaded directly to a cloud server via a Starlink satellite dish I hid on the roof. I couldn't rely on the local internet, which Garrison had likely stopped paying for anyway. I moved to the living room. The grand stone fireplace dominated the wall. Above the mantel hung a large portrait of my mother. She was smiling, looking out over her garden. Brittany would hate it. I took a smaller, framed photo of Mom, one of her laughing, holding me as a baby, and placed it right in the center of the mantel. It was bait. I wanted to see what they would do with it. Finally, I checked the smart locks I had installed on the front door months ago during a quick inspection trip. I opened the app on my phone and changed the access code. The old code was my birthday. Garrison never bothered to change defaults. I deleted it. Now, the only way in was a physical key, which I had, or brute force. If they wanted in, they would have to break in. By sunset, I was done. I stood in the center of the living room, checking the camera feeds on my iPad. Every angle was covered. The audio was crisp. I could hear the wind whistling through the loose shutter. I didn't stay at the ranch. That was too dangerous. If they arrived early and found me, the plan would be ruined. They needed to believe the house was empty. They needed to believe they had gotten away with it. I drove 30 miles into town and checked into a nondescript Motel 6 under a fake name. I set up my command center on the tiny, scratched desk in the motel room. My laptop, my iPad, and a pot of terrible motel coffee. I was ready. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the rats to smell the cheese. 3 days before the wedding, the invasion began. I was sitting in my room at the Motel 6, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. On the desk, my iPad was propped up on a stack of books, displaying a grid of 4 live camera feeds. The connection via Starlink was surprisingly stable. At 2:15 p.m., the motion sensor notification pinged. A black Range Rover crunched up the snowy driveway of Stonehaven Ridge, followed closely by a lifted red pickup truck that I recognized immediately. Trent's truck. He had added a new light bar and oversized tires since I last saw it, upgrades he definitely couldn't afford. Garrison stepped out of the Range Rover first. He was wearing a camel hair coat that looked expensive from a distance but was likely fraying at the cuffs if you got close. He looked around the property with a proprietary air, hands on his hips, surveying his kingdom. Trent jumped out of his truck, leaving the engine running. He looked rough, bags under his eyes, jittery energy. He kicked a pile of snow off his boots and walked up to the front porch. I turned up the volume on the iPad. The microphone hidden in the porch light picked up their voices clearly. "Place looks like a dump, Dad," Trent said, spitting on the ground. "You sure this is gonna impress the investors?" "It's rustic, Trent." "People pay extra for rustic," Garrison replied, his voice booming. "Once the decorators get here, it'll look like a Ralph Lauren catalog. Just get the door open." Garrison walked up to the heavy oak door. He punched in the code, 1-0-2-4. My birthday. Nothing happened. The lock remained engaged. The red light on the keypad blinked 3 times. Access denied. He frowned and punched it again, harder this time. 1-0-2-4, beep. 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 Damn it, Garrison muttered. Must be the batteries. "Let me try," Trent said. He pushed past our father and tried a different code, probably his own birthday. Denied. "Why is it locked?" Trent asked. "I thought you said you owned the place." "I do own it." Garrison snapped. It's the damn electronic lock. Your mother insisted on getting these smart gadgets. It probably reset itself when the power fluctuated. Useless technology. I watched, sipping my lukewarm coffee. Come on, Dad. Call a locksmith. Do the legal thing. But Garrison didn't call a locksmith. He didn't have the patience, and he probably didn't want to pay the emergency service fee. He looked at the window next to the door, a beautiful, original pane of glass that my mother had loved because it distorted the light in the mornings. We don't have time for this, Garrison said. The caterers are coming in an hour. He nodded at Trent. Trent grinned. It was a nasty, eager expression. He walked back to his truck and pulled a tire iron from the bed. Wait, I whispered to the screen. Don't do it. Trent swung. The sound of shattering glass was loud, even through the iPad speakers. I flinched. That wasn't just glass breaking, it was the final seal of my childhood being violated. Trent reached through the broken pane, undid the deadbolt, and swung the door open. We're in, Trent announced, stepping over the shards of glass on the foyer floor. Good, Garrison said, stepping inside without even looking at the damage. Put some cardboard over that window until we can get it fixed. And turn up the heat. It's freezing in here. I hit the Save Clip button on my screen. File name, evidence_01_breaking_and_entering.mp4. They weren't visiting family. They were invaders. And now, I had the first felony on tape. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in disrespect. Brittany arrived the following morning in a white convertible, shivering in a fur coat that was definitely fake. She brought with her a team of event stylists, 3 overworked women carrying bolts of tulle and boxes of fairy lights. I watched from the camera hidden on top of the kitchen cabinets. Brittany stood in the center of the living room, wrinkling her nose. It smells like old people, she complained. Can we Febreze the whole house? Or maybe burn some sage? I need to clear the energy. Whatever you want, sweetheart, Garrison said, looking at his phone. He was pacing, probably trying to dodge calls from the vendors he hadn't paid yet. And this furniture, Brittany gestured to the hand-carved rocking chair by the fireplace. My mother used to sit there and read to me. It's so depressing. Get rid of it. I want white leather couches. Modern. Chic. 2 movers grunted and hauled the rocking chair out the back door. I saw them dump it unceremoniously into the snow near the barn. My jaw tightened. That chair was worth more than Brittany's entire wardrobe, not that she would know quality if it hit her in the face. Then, she saw the mantle. I leaned closer to the screen. This was the test. I had placed the framed photo of Mom right in the center. It was impossible to miss. Brittany walked over to the fireplace. She picked up the frame. She stared at my mother's smiling face. Who is this? She asked. That's Eleanor, Garrison said, not looking up from his phone. My late wife. She's staring at me, Brittany said. She turned the photo face down. It's creepy. I can't have his ex-wife watching me get married. It's bad vibes. Just put it in a drawer, Brittany, Garrison waved his hand dismissively. No, she said. She walked over to a large cardboard box marked donations, which I suspected was actually just destined for the dumpster. She dropped the photo in. It landed with a thud on top of a pile of my mother's old cookbooks. Gone, Brittany smiled, clapping her hands. Now, let's drape this whole wall in pink silk. I want it to look like a castle. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the motel air conditioning. Up until that moment, this had been a financial transaction. I was reclaiming an asset. I was punishing bad business partners. But watching Brittany toss my mother's memory into a trash box while my father ignored it? That changed everything. The ledger was no longer just about money. It was about erasure. They were trying to delete my history to overwrite it with their cheap, flashy future. I opened my laptop and pulled up the dossier I had been compiling on Garrison's business partners. I found the list of investors invited to the wedding. I cross-referenced their names with the guest list Garrison had emailed to the caterer, which I had hacked into easily, since his password was password123. I wasn't just going to stop the wedding. I was going to ensure that when the dust settled, Garrison wouldn't just be broke, he would be socially and professionally radioactive. You want to erase her? I whispered to the screen. Fine. Let's see how you handle being erased. Later that evening, the cameras caught Trent wandering upstairs. He had a beer in one hand and his phone in the other. He kicked open the door to what used to be my bedroom. I had cleared out most of my personal items years ago, but I had left a few things behind: a bookshelf, a desk, and a small, locked jewelry box on the dresser. The box wasn't valuable, but inside was a vintage silver brooch shaped like a thistle. It wasn't expensive, maybe worth $200, but Mom had worn it on her coat every winter. She had told me it was mine when I turned 30. Trent set his beer on my desk, leaving a wet ring on the wood. He rattled the jewelry box. Locked. He didn't look for a key. He pulled a pocket knife from his jeans and jammed it into the latch. With a twist and a snap, the lid popped open. Bingo, he muttered. He fished around inside, ignoring the sentimental notes and trinkets, and pulled out the silver brooch. He held it up to the light, squinting. Silver, he said. Better than nothing. He shoved it into his pocket. Then, his phone rang. He put it on speaker and set it on the dresser, right in front of the camera hidden in the smoke detector. The audio was crystal clear. Yeah, Vinny? Trent said. A gravelly voice answered. You got my money, Trent? It's been 2 weeks. I'm running out of patience. Relax, Vinny, Trent said, pacing the room. I told you, the big payout is coming. The old man is handing over the deed to the ranch right after the wedding. He's putting it in my name for tax purposes or whatever. I froze. Handing over the deed? Garrison couldn't do that. He didn't have the deed. But Trent didn't know that. Garrison must have promised him the ranch as a way to keep him quiet or by his loyalty. I don't care about deeds, I care about cash, Vinny growled. That's the plan. Trent insisted. As soon as the ink is dry, I'm listing the place. I already got a guy interested. Cash buyer. Fast close. I'll have your 50 grand by next Friday. Plus interest. You better, Vinny said. Or you won't be walking down any aisles. The line went dead. Trent took a long swig of his beer, looking at himself in my mirror. Easy money, he whispered. I saved the clip. Evidence_02_theft_and_conspiracy.mp4. This was the final piece of the puzzle. They weren't just using the ranch for a party. They were planning to sell it immediately after. Garrison was likely going to transfer the title, which he thought he had, to Trent to hide the asset from his own creditors, and Trent was going to sell it to pay off a loan shark. They were cannibalizing the last thing my mother left us. They were going to strip it for parts like a stolen car. I closed my laptop. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had enough now. I had burglary. I had theft. I had conspiracy to commit fraud. I could call the police right now and have them dragged out in cuffs. But that wasn't enough. If I arrested them tonight, they would spin it. Garrison would play the victim, say it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute. He would talk his way out of it. No. I needed witnesses. I needed an audience. I needed to wait for the wedding. If you are enjoying this story of family betrayal and cold-blooded revenge, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below with the name of the city you are listening from. I'd love to see where our community is growing. Every comment helps this story reach more people. Thank you. The night before the wedding, Stonehaven Ridge looked like a carnival. Garrison had strung thousands of Edison bulbs from the barn to the main house, creating a canopy of artificial light that drowned out the stars. The driveway was packed with cars, mostly rentals, but a few luxury sedans belonging to his investors. I sat in my rented Ford Expedition, parked on a logging road about a mile up the ridge. From here, using a pair of high-powered binoculars, I could see down into the valley. The ranch was glowing. It looked warm, inviting, and expensive. It looked like a lie. I ate a cold ham sandwich from a gas station, watching the tiny figures moving on the porch. I checked my iPad. The interior cameras showed the living room packed with people. Waiters were passing trays of champagne. Brittany was wearing a white cocktail dress, holding court in the center of the room, laughing loudly at something a wealthy banker said. Garrison clinked a spoon against his glass. The room went quiet. I turned up the audio on my iPad. Friends, family, esteemed partners, Garrison began, his voice thick with emotion, or expensive scotch. He placed a hand on Brittany's shoulder. Thank you for coming to our sanctuary. You know, when I bought this land 20 years ago, it was just dirt and trees. I audibly scoffed in my car. You didn't buy it, Dad. Mom did. I built this house with my own hands, he continued. Another lie. He had hired contractors and then sued them to avoid paying the final bill. I built it as a legacy. A fortress for my family. And now, I am so proud to share it with my new love, Brittany, and my son, Trent, who will one day carry on the Garrison name. Applause rippled through the room. Trent was beaming, standing in the corner, probably calculating how much the silverware would fetch at a pawn shop. People told me I was crazy to dream this big, Garrison said, wiping a fake tear. But look around you. This is what success looks like. This is what resilience looks like. We own this mountain. Here, the banker shouted. I watched Garrison soak up the adoration. He truly believed it. In that moment, the foreclosure notices, the unpaid bills, the stolen money, it all vanished from his mind. He was the king of Stonehaven. He had successfully rewritten reality to suit his ego. He had erased Mom. He had erased me. And he was selling a fraudulent bill of goods to everyone in that room. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted like cardboard, but I chewed it slowly. Enjoy the champagne, Dad, I whispered. Because tomorrow, you're going to have a hell of a hangover. I switched tabs on my iPad. I had one final email to send. It was to Sheriff Burke. Subject, urgent assistance required, trespassing and grand larceny in progress. Attachment, the _evidence_binder.zip. I hit send. The trap was primed. The cheese was eaten. Tomorrow, the steel bar would snap shut. At 7 a.m. on the morning of the wedding, I met Sheriff Burke and my lawyer, Sierra, at a diner in town. Sheriff Burke was a man cut from granite. He was 60, with a mustache that looked like a push broom and eyes that had seen every lie a human being could tell. He had known my mother. He had respected her. Sierra sat next to me, looking sharp in a navy blazer. She was my college roommate turned shark attorney. She had the legal documents spread out on the greasy table, right next to the maple syrup. This is airtight, Morgan, Sierra said, tapping the deed. You own the property. You own the debt. The trust is dissolved. They have zero legal right to be there. And the criminal charges? I asked, looking at Burke. Burke took a sip of black coffee. He tapped the iPad where I had queued up the videos. Breaking and entering. Felony vandalism. Grand larceny for the jewelry. And based on what you dug up on his financials, fraud. Lots of fraud. He looked at me. I can go up there right now, Morgan. Drag him out before they even put their socks on. Save you the drama. I shook my head. No. Not yet. Why? Burke asked. Why wait? Because if you arrest him now, it's just a private shame, I said. He'll spin it. He'll tell those investors that it was a misunderstanding, that his daughter is mentally unstable and vindictive. He'll survive this. He always survives. I leaned forward. I need those investors to see him in cuffs. I need them to see the sheriff dragging him off the property he claimed to own. I need his reputation to be so thoroughly destroyed that he can never scam another person again. Sierra nodded slowly. She's right. If we want to kill the Garrison Enterprises myth, we have to do it publicly. Burke sighed, but I saw a glint of agreement in his eyes. He hated Garrison. Everyone in town did. They hated the way he treated service workers, the way he didn't pay his bills, the way he strutted around like a peacock. All right, Burke said. The ceremony starts at noon? Noon, I confirmed. They're doing it on the front lawn, facing the mountains. I'll have my deputies staged at the main gate at 11:50, Burke said. We wait for your signal. What's the signal? Sierra asked. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Oh, you'll hear it. It's going to be loud. I paid the check. As we walked out into the cold morning air, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anxiety was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the math. Garrison had spent his life treating people like numbers on a spreadsheet. Today, he was going to learn what happens when the numbers fight back. Noon arrived with a bright, blinding sun reflecting off the snow. From the cab of the Ford Expedition, parked just behind the tree line of the driveway, I watched the guests file into the seating area. Garrison had rented white Chiavari chairs, hundreds of them, and arranged them on the front lawn facing the majestic peaks of the Absarika Range. It was a perfect view. A view that cost my mother 2 decades of savings and cost me $2 million. The guests were a mix of the gullible and the greedy. I recognized Mr. Henderson, a local developer who I knew had loaned Garrison $50,000 last month. I saw Mrs. Gable, a widow who Garrison had charmed into investing in his non-existent tech startup. They were smiling, dressed in furs and wool suits, completely unaware that they were celebrating a man who viewed them as ATMs with legs. Then came the music. A string quartet began to play Pachelbel's canon. It was cliché. It was perfect for them. Trent walked down the aisle first. He was the best man. He wore a tuxedo that didn't quite fit, tugging at his collar. He looked hungover. He high-fived a few people in the front row, acting the part of the carefree heir. I knew that inside his jacket pocket sat my mother's silver thistle brooch, ready to be pawned the moment the ceremony ended. Garrison stood at the altar, a wooden arch draped in white roses that probably cost $3,000. He looked regal. He stood tall, chest puffed out, surveying the crowd. He looked like a man who had won. He thought he had successfully exiled his buzzkill daughter and secured his future. Then, the bride. Brittany emerged from the front door of the house. She was wearing a dress that can only be described as a glitter bomb. It had a train that dragged 10 feet behind her, collecting snow and dead leaves. She walked slowly, soaking up the attention, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face. I put the truck into gear. My heart wasn't racing. My hands were steady on the wheel. This wasn't an act of passion. It was an audit. And the numbers didn't balance. The officiant, a hired minister from town, raised his hands. We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. I waited. I let them get comfortable. I let Brittany reach the altar. I let Garrison take her hands. I let the silence of the moment settle over the valley, heavy and reverent. If anyone can show just cause why this couple may not lawfully be joined together, the minister said, reciting the script, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Usually, there is a polite silence here. A few coughs. Maybe a baby crying. Instead, I floored the accelerator. The Ford Expedition roared to life, the diesel engine snarling like a waking beast. I didn't drive down the driveway. I drove straight over the lawn. I crushed the pristine snow. I flattened the "wedding this way" signs. I swerved around the back of the seating area and drove straight up the center aisle. Screams erupted. Guests dived out of the way, clutching their pearls and champagne flutes. I slammed on the brakes 10 feet from the altar, the massive grille of the truck looming over Brittany and Garrison like a Judgment Day monolith. The engine idled, a deep, mechanical thrum that vibrated in everyone's chest. I killed the ignition. The silence that followed was louder than the screams. Garrison's face was a study in color theory. It went from tanned bronze to chalk white, and then to a violent, vascular purple. "What the hell is this?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Security! Get this maniac out of here!" 2 rented security guards, college kids in ill-fitting blazers, stepped forward tentatively. They looked at the massive truck, then at me as I opened the driver's side door. I stepped out. I wasn't wearing a dress. I wasn't wearing jeans. I was wearing my court suit, a sharp, tailored charcoal blazer and matching trousers, with stiletto heels that stabbed into the frozen ground. I looked exactly like what I was, a forensic accountant arriving to seize assets. "There is no need for security, Garrison," I projected my voice. I didn't need a microphone yet, the adrenaline carried my words to the back row. "Unless they are here to escort you off the premises." "Morgan?" Brittany shrieked. "You ruined my dress. You got mud on my train. You were banned." "I was banned from the wedding," I said calmly, walking past the hood of the truck to stand between them and the guests. "But you forgot one small detail. You cannot ban the landlord from inspecting her own property." "Landlord?" Trent laughed nervously, stepping forward. "You're drunk, Morgan. Go home. Dad owns this place. It's in the trust." "The trust is empty, Trent," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Foreclosed on 3 months ago. Sold to cover Dad's defaulted loans." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The investors in the front row exchanged worried glances. "Lies!" Garrison bellowed. He tried to regain control of the room, turning to the guests with a wide, fake smile. "Folks, I am so sorry. My daughter has mental health struggles. She's off her medication. Please, ignore her. She's just jealous." "Am I?" I asked. I pulled out my phone. I had connected it via Bluetooth to the massive PA system they had set up for the music. The system was unsecured, another oversight. "Let's see who is telling the truth," I said. "This is a recording from yesterday. Inside this house. In my old bedroom." I hit play. Trent's voice boomed over the valley, amplified to concert-level volume. "Yeah, I got collateral. Dad's giving me the deed after the wedding. I'll sell the place next week. Cash buyer. I'll have your 50 grand by next Friday." The crowd gasped. Trent froze, his face draining of color. He looked like a deer in headlights. I didn't stop. I hit the next track. This one was Garrison, recorded on the porch the day they broke in. "Place looks like a dump. Just get the door open. People pay extra for rustic. Put some cardboard over that window until we can get it fixed." And finally, the kicker. Brittany's voice. "Who is this?" "She's staring at me. It's creepy." Gone. Followed by the sound of my mother's photo hitting the trash box. I cut the audio. The silence was absolute. I turned to the guests. "You are sitting on stolen property. You are celebrating a wedding paid for with bounced checks, hosted by a man who is currently trespassing in the home of his dead wife, which he lost to the bank months ago." I pointed at Garrison. "He didn't invite you here to celebrate love. He invited you here to witness a fraud. He needs this wedding to prove he still has money so he can borrow more from you." "Shut up." Garrison lunged at me. "I'll kill you, you ungrateful little." He raised his hand to strike me. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. Because I saw the red and blue lights flashing at the bottom of the driveway. Garrison's hand froze in midair. Not because of his conscience, but because Sierra, my lawyer, had stepped out from the passenger side of my truck. She wasn't alone. She was flanked by 2 deputies. Sierra walked straight to the front row where Mr. Henderson and the other major investors sat. She held a stack of documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sierra announced, her voice sharp and professional. "My name is Sierra Vance, attorney at law. What I am handing you now are certified copies of the title deed for Stonehaven Ridge, dated October 1st. She handed the papers to Mr. Henderson. He adjusted his glasses, reading the bold text at the top. "Owner, Nemesis Holdings, LLC," he read aloud. "Sole member, Morgan Garrison." He looked up at my father. The look wasn't one of confusion anymore. It was disgust. "Garrison? Is this true? You told me the trust held the land free and clear." "It's a technicality," Garrison stammered, backing away. "She stole it. She manipulated the paperwork. I am the victim here." "The only thing I stole, Dad," I said, stepping closer to him, "was your ability to lie to these people." I turned to Brittany. She was trembling, mascara running down her cheeks. "And you," I said softly. "You wanted a castle? You wanted to be the queen of the manor? Well, the queen is dead. And you're just a trespasser in a glittery dress." "I didn't know," Brittany sobbed, looking around for an exit. "He told me he was rich. He told me this was all his." "He lied," I said. "That's what he does." Trent tried to sneak away. He was edging toward the side of the altar, aiming for the woods. "I wouldn't go that way, Trent," I called out. "Why not?" he snapped, panic in his eyes. "Because Sheriff Burke is waiting in the trees," I said. As if on cue, Sheriff Burke emerged from the pine forest to the left of the altar. He was in full uniform, his hand resting on his service weapon. 2 more deputies appeared from behind the barn. The trap was fully sprung. There was no exit. Garrison looked around wildly. The guests were standing up, backing away from him as if he were contagious. The investors were already on their phones, likely calling their banks to stop payments on any checks they had written him. "This isn't real," Garrison whispered, looking at me. "You can't do this to your own father. I gave you life." "And you tried to sell mine," I replied. "You leveraged my future, my history, and my home. The account is closed, Dad." I looked at the guests one last time. "I apologize for ruining the party. But the reception is cancelled. Unless you want to stick around for the police statements." The end didn't come with a bang, but with the metallic click of handcuffs. Sheriff Burke walked up the aisle. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with the heavy, inevitable pace of justice. He stopped in front of Garrison. "Garrison Miller," Burke said, his voice carrying over the wind. "You are under arrest for burglary, trespassing, and multiple counts of fraud." "You can't arrest me," Garrison shouted, trying to pull his arm away. "This is a civil matter. My daughter is confused." "We have video evidence of you breaking the window to gain entry," Burke said calmly, spinning Garrison around and snapping the cuffs on his wrists. "And we have a warrant for your financial records regarding the Ponzi scheme you've been running under Garrison Enterprises." Garrison went limp. The fight left him. He looked at the investors, pleading with his eyes. "It's a mistake. I can fix this. Just give me a week." No one answered him. Mr. Henderson turned his back. Then Burke turned to Trent. "Trent Miller. You are under arrest for grand larceny and conspiracy." "Larceny?" Trent squeaked. "I didn't steal anything." "Empty your pockets, son," Burke said. A deputy patted him down. From the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket, the deputy pulled out the silver thistle brooch. He held it up. The silver glinted in the sunlight. My mother's, I said, my voice thick. He stole it from her jewelry box yesterday. Cuff him, Burke ordered. Trent started crying. Not a dignified, silent cry, but a loud, wailing sob. Dad told me I could take it. He said everything was ours. Dad, tell them. Garrison didn't look at his son. He was staring at the ground, defeated. Finally, there was Brittany. She stood alone at the altar, the white roses framing her humiliation. She looked at the sheriff, then at me. Am I under arrest? She asked, her voice trembling. Did you knowingly participate in the fraud? Burke asked. No, she screamed. I just wanted to get married. He told me he was a millionaire. I'm the victim. Then you better start talking, Burke said. Get in the car. We'll take your statement at the station. She hiked up her massive, muddy dress and ran toward the police cruisers, leaving her bouquet on the ground. The guests began to disperse, rushing to their cars to escape the scene. Within 10 minutes, the lawn was empty of spectators. I stood there, watching the deputies load my father and brother into the back of the cruisers. Garrison looked out the window at me. His eyes were cold, filled with hate. He mouthed something. I think it was "You'll pay for this." I watched the cars drive away, down the long, winding driveway, past the broken gate. Sierra walked up to me and put a hand on my shoulder. It's done, Morgan. It's over. I looked at the empty chairs, the ruined lawn, and the tire tracks from my truck. Yeah, I said, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. It's finally over. I walked over to the trash box the movers had left on the porch. I dug through the tinsel and the fake flowers until my fingers brushed against cool glass. I pulled out the framed photo of my mother. The glass wasn't cracked. She was still smiling. I wiped a smudge of dirt off her face. We got Mom, I whispered. Get off our land. The adrenaline crash hit me about 2 hours later. I was sitting in a hard plastic chair in the waiting room of the sheriff's station, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Sierra was inside with the deputies, finalizing the paperwork for the restraining order I was filing against my entire family. I didn't need to be there, but I needed to know. I needed to know if they understood what they had done. Sheriff Burke came out, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked exhausted but satisfied. He sat down next to me. Well, it is quite a show in there, Burke said. Are they talking? I asked. Oh, they are singing like canaries, Burke chuckled. But not the same tune. It is a circular firing squad. He opened his notebook. Your brother, Trent? He folded in about 5 minutes. As soon as we mentioned federal conspiracy charges, he started blaming your father for everything. He claims Garrison forced him to break the window. He claims Garrison promised him the deed to the ranch as payment for gambling debts. He even gave us the name of his bookie. Typical, I said. Trent was a coward. He would sell his own kidney if it meant avoiding consequences. And Brittany? I asked. She is playing the naive trophy wife card, Burke said. She claims she had no idea the ranch was foreclosed. She says Garrison showed her fake bank statements. Honestly? I believe her on that one. She isn't smart enough to run a fraud this complex. We are charging her with trespassing, but she will probably get off with a fine and community service. And Garrison? I asked. The name felt heavy on my tongue. Burke's face hardened. He is a piece of work, Morgan. He isn't confessing to anything. He is sitting in that cell demanding to speak to the governor. He keeps saying you set him up. He calls you. Burke hesitated. A snake? I guessed. A traitor? An ungrateful brat? All of the above, Burke admitted. He truly believes he is the victim. He thinks that because he raised you, he owns you. He thinks your money is his money. The concept of you having a separate identity doesn't exist in his brain. I nodded slowly. That was the closure I needed. I had held on to a tiny, foolish hope that maybe, when faced with the reality of prison, my father would have a moment of clarity. That he would say, "I'm sorry. But narcissists don't do clarity. They only do projection." He won't get bail, Burke continued. The FBI is already involved. Based on the files you sent, he is looking at serious time for wire fraud and tax evasion. The wedding stunt was just the cherry on top. He is going away, Morgan. For a long time. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but steady. Good, I said. Do me a favor, Sheriff? Don't tell him I was here. I don't want him to think I care enough to wait. Understood, Burke said. He stood up and shook my hand. Your mom would be proud of you, kid. You protected her house. I did, I said. Now I just have to clean it. Returning to Stonehaven Ridge the next day felt like walking onto a battlefield after the smoke had cleared. The silence was back, but the scars were visible. The front lawn was a mess of tire tracks and mud where I had driven the truck. The white chairs were overturned, scattered like teeth knocked out of a giant's mouth. The wedding arch, with its $3,000 worth of dying roses, stood crookedly against the mountain backdrop. I didn't hire a crew. I needed to do this myself. I spent the next 3 days scrubbing my family out of my home. I took down the thousands of Edison bulbs Garrison had strung up. I ripped down the pink silk drapes Brittany had stapled to the walls. I threw the Garrison and Brittany banners into a bonfire I built in the backyard. Watching those banners burn was the most therapeutic thing I have ever done. The plastic melted and curled, turning into black smoke that drifted up into the cold Montana sky. But the physical cleanup was the easy part. The financial cleanup was my specialty. I spent my evenings at the kitchen table, with Mom's photo back in its rightful place on the mantel, going through the legal wreckage of Garrison Enterprises. As the primary creditor, since I owned his debt, I had the right to liquidate his remaining assets to recoup my $2 million. It was grim work. Garrison had almost nothing left. His luxury condo in the city was rented. His car was leased. His bank accounts were overdrawn. But I found a few things. A hidden offshore account with $50,000, money he had likely stolen from investors. I turned that over to the feds. A storage unit full of expensive golf clubs and art he had bought while claiming poverty. I auctioned those off. I made sure every penny went to the small people he had hurt. The caterers. The florists. The band. I paid them out of my own pocket first, then reimbursed myself from the liquidation. I wasn't going to let my father's legacy be a trail of unpaid workers. By the end of the week, the house was empty of his presence. The smell of Brittany's cheap perfume was gone, replaced by the scent of wood smoke and lemon polish. I walked into the guest room where they had stayed. I stripped the sheets and threw them in the trash. I didn't even want to wash them. On the bedside table, I found a notepad. On it, Garrison had written a speech. It wasn't his wedding vows. It was a pitch for a new investment scam he planned to launch after the honeymoon. Project Phoenix, he had scrawled. New beginnings. High yield. I crumpled the paper and tossed it into the fire. Project cancelled, I said to the empty room. I sat down at the piano, the one Mom used to play. I hadn't touched the keys in years. My fingers were stiff. I played a clumsy C major chord. It rang out through the house, clear and bright. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt owned. Truly owned. Not by a bank, not by a trust, and certainly not by Garrison Miller. It belonged to Morgan. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. 6 months have passed since the Red Wedding, as the town locals like to call it. Winter has settled deep into the valley. The snow is 4 feet deep, wrapping Stonehaven Ridge in a blanket of white silence. I am sitting on the porch, wrapped in a wool blanket, drinking coffee that I made in my own kitchen. Updates? I have a few. Garrison pleaded guilty last month. His lawyer realized that with my forensic report and the video evidence, a trial would be a massacre. He took a plea deal for 5 years in federal prison. He is currently serving time in a minimum security facility in Colorado. He sends me letters once a week. I don't open them. I put them directly into a shredder. I don't need to read his excuses. Trent got lucky. Because he testified against Dad, he got probation and community service. He is currently working at a car wash in Missoula. He texted me once, asking for a loan to start a crypto business. I blocked his number. Some people never learn, but I don't have to finance their lessons anymore. Brittany? She vanished. Rumor has it she moved to Miami and is looking for a new millionaire husband. I almost pity the next guy. Almost. As for me, I still work as a forensic accountant, but I do it remotely from the ranch. I look out at the mountains while I hunt for hidden assets. The internet is better now. I upgraded the satellite system. I spent another $100,000 fixing the windows and restoring the garden my mother loved. Come spring, it will be blooming with tulips and daffodils, just like she wanted. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I was too harsh. I wonder if there was another way. Could I have just told him? Could I have warned him? But then I remember the sound of the glass breaking. I remember him laughing as Brittany threw Mom's photo in the trash. I remember the absolute entitlement in his voice when he claimed he built this place. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a doormat. He wanted a bank account. And when I stopped being those things, he tried to discard me. I didn't just crash a wedding. I crashed a cycle of abuse that had been running for 30 years. I stood up for the little girl who was always told she wasn't good enough, and I stood up for the mother who was too sick to fight back. The sheriff was right. My mom would be proud. So, here is my question to you. My father says I am a vindictive monster who ruined his life over a piece of land. My aunt, who I haven't spoken to in 10 years, says family should forgive everything, even theft. But I look at this deed with my name on it, and I feel peace. Am I the asshole for letting my father spend his last dime on a wedding I knew I was going to destroy, just to make sure he went to prison with nothing left to lose? Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed watching a toxic family get served a cold plate of justice, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments, would you have warned them, or would you have let the trap snap like I did?